In this week's episode, for a first, I'm doing a solo episode. So I'm joined by myself to shine my light on some of the intense darkness in the world right now. So this week I'll also talk about inclusive books winning big, pride over profits, Michigan stepping up against hate, and more. Hey there, my name is Bernadette Smith, and I'm a keynote speaker and writer. My pronouns are she and her. Welcome to 5 Things in 15 Minutes, my weekly show where I bring good vibes to DEI. That is good vibes to diversity, equity, and inclusion with a little dash of corporate social responsibility. What I found is there are lots of news stories about what's going wrong in the world and lots of negative data. But there are also a lot of things going right. That's what I like to focus on. I search for stories that we can be inspired by and learn from. My hope is to inspire you to experiment with some of these actions and policies to help you build a more inclusive world. All right, so this is my first solo show. I'm a little nervous. I am a speaker for a living, and here I am doing a solo show, and I'm finding myself nervous in front of a camera. And even though there probably aren't a lot of people watching or listening, I'm sure there are a lot of people listening. Anyway, here's the thing. Right now, I'm a U.S. citizen. I'm a member of the LGBTQ community, and I know that I feel myself getting very stressed and tense. I know that lots of people in my family and my peer group and lots of people I know are pretty freaked out right now because of the new policies and executive orders of the new administration. So there have been things like last week, federal employees are no longer allowed to share pronouns and email signatures. There have basically every DEI employee or DEI adjacent has been at least temporarily put on leave, if not been asked to leave. Definitely lots of funding freezes and cuts to people already doing this work. My firm lost a contract with the Food and Drug Administration. There are a few other things which we have uncertainty about. And so it is really stressful right now, not only for me, but for people really directly under attack, like especially trans folks who are just the barrage of attacks is against them is really relentless. So where is the good vibes? It's coming, I promise. But I wanted to give you a little tip that I've been using to kind of basically keep myself together in these times. And one thing, so that's a baby picture of me. That is me when I was, I guess, maybe 5. I don't know if you can see the resemblance. But, as a little kid, I was an outsider for lots of reasons. I was the youngest in my family. I felt probably like a queer kid who didn't have those words in a world that I knew wasn't going to accept me, at least at that age. So I definitely had a lot of sort of baggage around being an outsider or feeling different my whole childhood. And I think a lot of that really stemmed from my, essentially like closeted self and knowing that there is a lot of potential rejection. But also my parents were immigrants from Ireland and they had a very strong, my dad in particular, a very strong scarcity mindset about, my dad left home when he was 14. He was the oldest of 11. And so he had to go and provide for the family and make room in the house. He came to the U.S. as an immigrant at 18. And so he had been hustling his whole life. And the scarcity mindset that he brought, because it was just the reality was scarcity that he had, definitely transferred onto me. And so that manifested in him, it manifested as racism and sort of competition for resources. It manifested in certainly, just personal finances and how that played out in our day-to-day buying decisions. But in me, it sort of manifested as a fear of like losing these contracts, right? These contracts that are coming there in the past it manifested as competition. I don't have that anymore. I've worked really hard. Basically, I'm trying to say I've worked really hard to sort of get through this childhood stuff. And we all have it for whatever reason, whatever our personal stories happen to be. You have your own, I have my own. So whatever they are, whatever they happen to be, we all have our stuff. And really, we need to kind of figure out how to soothe that younger version of ourself because of all of those fears. We need to show that younger version of ourself some compassion. So that's sort of been one of the tools that I have really developed for myself are tools of self-compassion. Because listen, it's a hard world out there. I've been an entrepreneur for 20 years, so I've had to, and which is, a roller coaster ride. And for so many of those years, I was involved at planning weddings for LGBTQ couples for the first half of my career. And so I was at the whim of legislation and the government and the Supreme Court. And so I sort of got used to having the macro political environment affect my business. And here it is happening again. So I've had to develop a lot of tools to manage myself, to soothe the little baby inside me, the little young person who had her own little traumas, right? And so one of the ways I have done that, and one of the tools that I've developed, are tools around self-compassion. So self-compassion is really about, let's just say, first of all, it's a concept that's been really pioneered by Dr. Kristen Neff, who says when we give ourselves the same kindness and support we'd give to a good friend. That's really the idea behind self-compassion. And so in theory, in practice, that looks like having some mindfulness when we're stressed out or struggling, without overreacting or being judgmental, just sort of seeing ourselves as recognizing our emotions, right? The second part is kindness. So being supportive and understanding. For me, that means that I'm like, I can feel it. I can feel myself, taking a breath and just relaxing a little bit as I soothe myself. And it's going to be awkward at first if you try some of these self-compassion techniques. There's no doubt that it's going to be awkward, but the feeling of self-soothing and saying kind things to yourself during a hard time rather than critical things to yourself can be amazingly effective. And also, realizing that you are a human on this earth with all sorts of emotions and all sorts of traumas from your own experience. You're going to make mistakes. You're not always going to get it right. You're not always going to get through this stuff easily. So having a sense of self-compassion means you're sort of recognizing your place in the world and how it all contributes to whatever you might be feeling right now. So in practice, how this actually plays out for me in practice means that I say, and this is going to be cheesy, and listen, it is embarrassing doing this on LinkedIn and YouTube. And those of you who are listening as a podcast, you should go check it out on YouTube. But for me in practice, that means that I do make time usually after my shower when I'm moisturizing, because I like to multitask. I'm like, okay, I'm moisturizing anyway. Let me just give myself some self-compassion. So for me, it usually means things like saying, I deeply love and accept myself, and I allow myself to be loved, and I shine my light everywhere I go. I mean, that's just a really simple thing that I do, and it feels really vulnerable to do it. But that's one of the ways that I practice self-compassion. I'm just going to see if there's anyone on LinkedIn who's typing in some comments. Would certainly welcome you to share any of your own experiences with self-compassion and anything that you might be doing to kind of regulate yourself during such a stressful and frankly triggering time. Again, keep in mind that when you give yourself the same kindness and support you give to an old friend, it can do a lot to soothe yourself. It can do a lot to calm your nervous system, and to really treat that younger version of yourself with a little kindness, because those are the fears that could be triggered right now. So that's sort of my advice for this week, from all of my experience in the roller coaster of entrepreneurship. So really this week, I wish you self-compassion. It leads to resilience, and I would say more than ever right now, we need that resilience. So let's get into this week's good vibes. The first story this week comes from the Schneider Family Book Awards, which honored A Little Like Magic, Popcorn, and Chronically Dolores for their artistic portrayals of the disability experience. So these books are tailored for different age groups. They explore themes like anxiety, chronic illness, and disability identity through relatable, empowering stories. And these honorees, they elevate these narratives of resilience, as I was talking about, narratives of friendship, and if this, the types of narratives that are in children's books anyway, but with a sort of a lens and an overlay of kids who might struggle with anxiety, chronic illness, and disability. So this is so important because we want to see ourselves represented. And kids have these emotions and struggles as well. And if they see themselves represented in books, it sort of normalizes whatever they might be going through. And stories in general foster empathy, they foster understanding, they counter stereotypes. So this is all so important. And I love that it's happening at the kids' level, and I love that they're being awarded for it by the Schneider Family Book Awards. All right, the second story this week comes from the state of Michigan, which has an updated hate crime law signed by Governor Whitmer. This new hate crime law broadens protections to include LGBTQ plus folks alongside other marginalized groups. So this means that it is, I think, the 24th state now, plus Washington, D.C., that has these protections, which means that about half the states in the country do not have these protections. So let's just keep that in mind as well. I mean, it is great news. Michigan folks, Michigan LGBTQ plus folks can feel a little safer, but also half the country doesn't have these protections. And according to the FBI, reported hate crimes based on sexual orientation and gender identity have risen sharply over the past decade. Right now, there's a lot of anti-LGBTQ commentary out there. There's a lot of anti-LGBTQ legislation. Certainly, we're seeing it from the administration, and violence is going up as a result. So these protections really matter a lot. So if you don't live in one of those states that has LGBTQ plus identities in the state anti-discrimination policy or the hate crime policy, please advocate for that because it really does matter. Okay, the third story this week comes from the country of Thailand, which in the last episode of 5 Things in 15 Minutes I shared has marriage equality now. But now Thailand's public health ministry, they have allocated 145.6 million baht, their currency, to provide hormone therapy for 200,000 transgender citizens. So this means that, keep in mind, trans folks have traditionally, certainly here in the U.S., in many cases, paid out of pocket for many medical treatments, including hormone treatment. And sometimes this means that there has been unsupervised use because of financial barriers. And that can be a risk for folks. It can be a medical risk. So this new funding ensures that folks can be safer, that they can get medically supervised care, and that ultimately this will hopefully reduce health disparities. And I love this because it is really setting an example of transgender people as like humans, and that they have they are a public health priority. So I really love this story. Another story this week comes from Minneapolis. So you may have heard the news that Target pulled back from some of their DEI initiatives. They are no longer participating in the Human Rights Campaign Corporate Equality Index. And so they decided that Twin Cities Pride, I should say, pulled their ties with Target over Target's decisions. So, I mean, this story, the Target decision really broke my heart because I'm a huge fan of Target, and I've always sort of called them out as a best-in-class company that's doing great with DEI. So Twin Cities Pride cut their ties with Target, set up a GoFundMe, and then raised over $72,000. So what they had lost was 50, so they have exceeded their goal. And I think it just shows how individuals can sort of fill in some of the gaps when corporations and governments pull back, which sucks, honestly. Let's be real. I mean, it shouldn't be on individuals to have to do all this when there's such an important role that organizations play in supporting in supporting nonprofits like Twin Cities Pride. So allyship matters, resilience matters, and I'm really proud of the folks who rallied together and raised $72,000 plus for Twin Cities Pride. Okay, and the last story this week is a shout out to some companies who are towing the line, who are holding the line, I should say, about their DEI program. So many big companies, we've seen Costco and Apple being big stories, but also JP Morgan Chase, Cisco, Sephora, Pinterest, and lots of others, frankly. Companies that I talked to last week on sales calls, current clients, they're doubling down on their diversity commitments. They're saying DEI is not going anywhere. And when we have leaders like that, leaders like Costco's board of directors, JP Morgan's Chase's CEO, Jamie Dimon, when they emphasize that inclusion boosts innovation, when they emphasize the business case, it matters right now. That's how some people are motivated, is by the business case, not just sort of the it's good for everyone kind of thing, but the business case. So when businesses stand firm, it really does set a precedent. It shows that they're holding up despite political pressure, despite pressure from scumbags like Robbie Starbucks. So it's really, really important to us as marginalized folks to see companies holding the line, doubling down, because it's frankly demoralizing when they don't. And so we are grateful and we are loyal to those companies in particular. All right, so let's move into this week's Good Vibes to Go. So it is Lunar New Year, which is a 15-day festival in many parts of the world. This is the year of the snake. 2025 is the year of the snake. And I'm going to put a primer on Lunar New Year in the show notes so you can educate yourself. But, think about some folks who might celebrate. What do you say to them? Happy New Year. And the primer has some other good language that you can use and a little bit more that you can educate yourself for folks who celebrate. And a lot of people do. So this is a simple way that you can show that you are compassionate, inclusive, and it's a celebration. And who doesn't love a celebration? That is indeed good vibes. All right, folks, thank you so much for joining me today. If you don't already get the 5 Things newsletter, you can subscribe at 5thingsdei.com. No matter what's going on, I'm here. I'm going to give you these good vibes. I'm going to keep shining a light. I'm going to keep showing up. It's part of my purpose. It matters, now more than ever, it matters. And I'm here for it. So please come along with me. Please get the newsletter. Thousands of other people get the newsletter. A lot of people read it, over half open it and read it. So lots of people love it. So please check out the 5 Things newsletter. Get some good vibes in your inbox every Saturday morning. And then join me later in the next week for some good vibes in DEI on this show. 5 Things in 15 minutes. So keep up the good fight, and I'll be cheering you on. Take care. Thanks, folks. Have a great week. Thank you for listening to 5 Things in 15 minutes. I hope you found yourself inspired by at least one of this week's stories. If you did, would you mind sharing it with a colleague and leaving us a review on your favorite podcasting platform? And if you don't already get my 5 Things newsletter, join at 5thingsdei.com. I'm Bernadette Smith, and I'll see you next week right here for 5 Things in 15 minutes, bringing good vibes to DEI.